What is up?
How you doing?
Wait a second. I got to get the equalizer.
Okay. Ooh,
Okay.
That's my favorite sound.
Okay.
Cheers.
This one, we're going to talk about Frank Davis. But before we do that,
Hello, motherfucker.
how's everybody doing? Let's hit the drop here. Okay.
All right.
Let's start again. No, I'm kidding. That was last time. She's getting a beer.
Hey,
Charlie,
she can help herself.
she's opening the cooler. Look at that. I didn't even know she could do that.
What are you getting in there?
She's smelling them. She smells. There's other treats in there or what?
No, nothing in there. Just ice.
All right, episode 4. This is going to be a 6-episode season. This will take us to the end of the year 2024. Then in January, we kick off season 5. And I encourage everybody to go to youtube.com/@symbol Fight the Fear podcast and subscribe. We're going to have all new video editions there that you do not have to go to Patreon to see. However, if you want to support the podcast, you can go to patreon.com/Fight the Fear podcast and get bonus footage and all kinds of good stuff over there.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. Moving right along. This one is about Frank R. Davis. He was an American serial killer who raped and murdered 3 teenage boys in Indiana between 1971 and 1983, I should say.
Yikes.
And you know, it's when I think of serial killers, I think of like 30 victims, 20 victims, 15 victims.
Sure.
But by definition, 3's enough.
Yeah.
And it's over a several year period.
Yeah, that's quite
It just never, I don't know. I just feel like nowadays with profiling and stuff, I feel like investigators could probably pick up on a serial killer's pattern quicker because of past information that they have at their disposal. But it's just odd that you could, I mean, now looking back, of course, you could call this guy a serial killer, but at the time it was probably hard to pin down any kind of profile, to find him.
I'm sure it's been said many times, but I don't know the exact date, but they probably only coined the term serial killer in the 70s or 80s. Probably should look that up.
I think there's that show Mindhunter.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's really good. That's some of the guys that first profiled criminals and stuff. I'll give you some background on this. So Frank R. Davis, he was born January 29th, 1953 in Indiana. He died on January 22nd, 2008 at the age of 54 in Indiana. He was convicted of 2 counts of murder and 2 counts of attempted murder. He was sentenced to death. It was commuted to 220 years in prison.
Wow.
So it says here, details of the case were 3 victims spanning 1971 to 1983 in the United States in Indiana. Okay, his early life. While in a juvenile detention center, this is where it's going to start off. Davis was sexually abused by one of the attendants and at least one other inmate. The courts later said the attack that Davis suffered from fellow inmates was similar to how he assaulted one of his victims. On January 10th, 1983, Davis confronted a 15-year-old boy at gunpoint, wrapped a wire around his neck, then forced him to perform oral sex.
Yikes.
He then pistol whipped him until he was unconscious. The boy would recover from the attack and later identify Davis. I think that was one of the things we said, that sometimes there would be something about control, something sexual, something maybe latent homosexuality because he was an adult already.
Could be.
Some insecurity, some mental disability, so much stuff there.
The abuse thing's big, though. If you're in that system, getting in trouble, and then you're taking advantage of it seems to be a pattern.
Right. And so then he's, returning that that energy, that feeling, or maybe he felt powerless because that's how somebody did that to him.
Sure.
So then that's the return. So this was in January of 83, and in June, actually on June 16th, 1983, Davis confronted 14-year-old Darren Reed at knife point after the two shared a beer. Davis wrapped a wire around his neck, performed oral sex on him, and then strangled him to death.
Oh. There's a little twist, but same MO with the strangulation with the wire.
On June 18th, 1983, 2 days later, two 15-year-old boys, including one named Jeff Lopez, were camping when they saw Davis in the woods. Davis was smoking marijuana and shared it with the two teens. Afterwards, he waited for them to go to sleep. Davis went into their tent, woke up Lopez, and moved him into the woods at knife point. He restrained the boy with wire, performed oral sex on him, and then strangled him to death with the wire. He then returned to the other boy, tied him up with wire, performed oral sex on him, before striking him in the head with the axe and leaving. The victim survived.
Ooh.
Davis's two surviving victims identified him, and he gave a full confession. He also confessed to the murder of 13-year-old Dwayne Bush on June 3rd, 1971. Bush had been kidnapped, sodomized, and strangled. Let me look at that case note real quick. Okay, that was from the South Bend Tribune in 1984. Okay. So now he had 3 in 1983. It was January and 2 in June. Or I'm sorry, 3 in June. And then he confessed to one that was years before that. Over 10 years before that.
Yeah. Had to unburden himself.
Trying to look at, so he would have been in his 20s, 1953 to 71, so not quite 20.
Mm-hmm.
And then
18, just 18, right?
Yeah, and then 30 years old in 83. Okay. So during the legal proceedings, Davis was charged with 2 counts of murder for killing Reed and Lopez and 2 counts of attempted murder for the assaults on the survivors. He was convicted of all the charges and sentenced to death for the 2 murders. Davis was also given 2 consecutive 50-year sentences for the 2 attempted murders. On December 8, 1993, his sentence for the murder convictions was reduced to 60 years each. All of the sentences ran consecutively, leaving Davis with 220 years to serve in prison. He died in prison on January 22nd, 2008. So it's like something came over him as a teen, and then he waited, almost 10 more years, 12 more years, and then
acted upon it again.
It was almost a spree, though. It was January, it was June, it was 2 days later, June 16th, June 18th.
Yeah, that downward spiral right there.
Yeah. Hold on. I can't, it's not picking it up on the mic, but I don't know why he chooses to do this now. Hey. Take this. Come on. Over there. You got all that room to chew that thing. She said, no, I want to do this over here.
Yeah.
The comedic side of me wanted to ask why he performed oral sex on the 2 boys on the same day. Like, I don't know if I'm being funny or smart aleck or just trying to find a reason, but it's like, was he trying to give them a pleasureful moment before he knew he was going to kill them or something? I don't know, man. It's weird that he would want to perform that on them and then kill them.
Yep. I think maybe it is more of him being maybe disgusted by his behavior or his desire to do it, and so then he had to get rid of the evidence, so to speak.
I see a
You
lot
go
of
a lot of different ways on that, but
I mean, I see it as you're in a position of power. You're overpowering them with you're controlling them with the knife, overpowering them with the wire. It would make sense to me to have that victim do something to you, for you, to somehow please your need to be,
sure,
powerful.
Right.
But it's an odd thing that he would perform the act, and I'm like, wow, that's opening yourself up for an escape attempt by the victim. It's really, but they're frozen, they're in fear, and you're doing this sexual act,
right?
And it's like, I would want to know what he was when he did the full confession, like what was going through his mind when he was deciding that's the way he was going to do it. Like he must have already known, I'm going to end their life.
Well,
but I'll send them off with. I don't know what to say there. It's like,
well, but if he enjoyed that act, why not leave him alive and keep do it again the next day or whatever?
Yeah.
I think it leads more to him being embarrassed by it or not wanting to admit to that side of himself, and so he wanted to do it, but then get rid of anybody that could say or prove it or show that side of him, like he was disgusted by it. It's like that latent homosexual people that we talk about where they pretend or they act out against them, but really they have those desires and they don't like it in themselves maybe, so they want to push it out of somebody else. Could be the same thing there.
Yeah, because I'm not judging either way on someone's sexual preference. It's just it's one of those oddities of the serial killer trait.
Mm-hmm.
That there's a shame involved in something that another side of you wants you to fulfill yet destroy.
Right. Yep.
But I found an actual old newspaper clipping from the South Bend Tribune. It was talking about his sentencing. It kind of starts in the middle of it's like a continuation, but it says Davis given death sentence in 2 slayings. It's continued from the front page of the paper. I don't have that here, but it says that it talks about evidence from these cases a little deeper. And it's kind of a time capsule because it's from 40 years ago. It says that evidence was presented that showed Davis stalked his victims, committed the murders while the rape victims were in his dominion or control, and that Davis had no mental defects that would lessen his understanding of the subscribed penalties. Davis at the time lived in Stillwell, also had an extensive past criminal record. Judge Cook heard the case after it was moved here on a change of venue from LaPorte County. It says here, the victim, Reed of Stillwell, was reported missing by his mother on June 17th. 2 days later, his body was found about a mile from his home by a woman mowing weeds. The next day, Fuller of Kingsford Heights was discovered by 2 workers in a nearby industrial park. He had been struck in the head with an axe. The discovery of Fuller, who survived the attack, touched off a search of the industrial park and a nature preserve for Lopez, Fuller's camping companion. Lopez's decapitated body was found on June 21st. So there's a little more detail there than what I just read off.
Right. Yeah.
Davis, whom police had suspected of other sex crimes, was arrested about an hour after Lopez's body was found. Police said he later admitted in a videotape confession to having sex with the youths and then killing or trying to kill them. Davis was charged with the attack at LaPorte. It says on Searing at LaPorte in January. I'm not sure why that says it like that. Anyway, it says Davis surprised police by not only admitting Davis surprised police by admitting not only the 4 attacks, but the June 71 slaying of Dwayne Bush, age 13, of Union Mills.
Mm-hmm.
Man, this is all right down the street.
So it's interesting. The only reason it's a serial killer is because of the one victim before. Otherwise, it would be a spree killer, right?
Right.
A little mix of both.
Yeah. That's really weird. It's not weird. It's just, it's interesting to read how they termed everything back then. Obviously they're being careful with their words for,
right.
First Amendment, censorship, caring about the families, stuff like that.
Yeah, innocent until proven
It's
guilty.
kind of like letting you,
know.
and letting you kind of decide for yourself. So then you kind of fill it in with the facts, the other facts from the other stuff that I was reading. But that's pretty interesting. I'll definitely try to make sure that one goes across in the video. Let's see, what else did I have here? Anytime you try to look up a newspaper thing these days, they want you to pay.
Oh, yeah. Nobody's selling papers. Digital copies, maybe.
So here is the actual Marshall County Circuit Court. It was venued from LaPorte County. They said they moved it. It says this is about the two murders from June 16th and June 18th, 1983. The victims were aged 14 and 15, no relationship to Davis. Method, manual strangulation with the wire. So here's a summary that they're given here. So everything's a little slightly worded, just a little different, and you get like a little deeper detail, So it
More
says
nuanced.
here, charges arose from 3 separate incidents. On January 10th, 15-year-old. See, they wouldn't say his name in this because this was a court document. So on January 10th, 15-year-old J.S. was confronted by Davis at gunpoint in a cornfield in LaPorte on the way back to his home. Davis put a wire around his neck and performed oral sex on him. Davis later pistol whipped him until he thought he was unconscious. J.S. recovered from the attack and later identified Davis. Now flash forward to June. On June 16th, 14-year-old D.R. was confronted by Davis with a knife after he and Davis drank a beer provided by Davis. Davis tied a wire around his neck, performed oral sex on him, then strangled him to death with his hands. I thought they said it was with the wire and the other thing. On June 18th, 2 15-year-old boys, J.L. and E.F., were camping out when they came across Davis in the woods. Davis was smoking pot and shared it with the teenagers. Davis left while the boys returned to the campsite. Davis watched and waited until the boys went to sleep, then went into the tent, woke up J.L., and escorted him into the woods at knife point. Davis tied him up with wire, then performed oral sex on him, then strangled him with the wire. Davis then returned and got E.F., tied him up with wire, and performed oral sex on him. Davis then struck him in the head with the axe and left. Davis had used his own name and was identified by the survivors. He gave a complete confession. And then there's trial information here. June 21st, 83, there was a hearing held. He was charged. They were looking for information for murder that was charge filed. Then they amended that. Then the venue moved to Marshall County. Then there was a notice of insanity defense. Then there was a competency hearing. Then there was an insanity defense withdrawal. So they had to withdraw it. That was in 1994. Then there was a jury trial, a plea agreement, a guilty plea, a sentencing hearing, and then a court sentencing. And the conviction again, pled guilty to murder, 2 counts, attempted murder, a felony, pursuant to a plea agreement which called for dismissal of. They just kind of reworked it. They called it like felony murder, and then they changed it to murder and then attempted murder. Then January of 1984, given the death sentence, and then 2 consecutive 50-year terms. So then the aggravated circumstances that they didn't, this is another thing they didn't have in earlier. There was a charge of child molestation and another charge of lying in wait. And actually it says aggravating circumstances, child molesting and lying in wait. So like ambush.
Yeah, premeditated.
Mm-hmm. It says here so those were aggravating circumstances. Then it gives mitigating circumstances. Emotional pressure, antisocial character disorder, sexual abuse as a prisoner in boys' school. So that was his defense, I guess.
Yeah, try to lessen the reason why he did it or explain why he did it, lessen the punishment.
Yeah, and then I was trying to see, and then it just goes on to say parties filed a joint motion for equitable relief, vacated the death sentence. This was in 1993. They vacated the death sentence, leaving intact the guilty plea for murder, 2 counts, and attempted murder, 2 counts, and the 50-year sentences for each of the other attempted murders. In December of 93, following a new sentencing hearing, Davis was resentenced by Special Judge Marvin McLaughlin to consecutive terms of 60 years murder, 60 years murder, 50 years attempted murder, and 50 years attempted murder, for a total sentence of 220 years imprisonment. So then he actually appealed this 3 years later, or sent it for appeal in 1996.
96.
And it was voted 5-0 to deny.
I wonder why.
Wow. I mean, if like giving someone 220 years in prison to me is useless. It's like,
sure it is.
I know you don't want them to have the possibility of getting out, but why, I don't know. Too many states are going soft on capital punishment.
Yeah.
Sorry, I hate to be so blunt, but man, when you start reading this stuff and you get into this shit about kids, and we have kids,
right,
and we have grandkids,
yep,
it really turns your heart a different direction, and you just, it's like, I'm all for like humanity and trying to understand that, life in a general term deserves to be lived until it can't, and but when you have these disgusting acts, I've often said, like, when people write stories and they talk about demons, that humans are the demons. Humans are the only thing that I've ever come into contact with that could create such a thing.
Yeah,
through their
evil,
through their imaginations and their actions.
Yeah.
So to say you're sentenced to 220 years, no, just there's a hole in the back. Just drop him in there when you're done.
If you get convicted,
if you're
you
guilty,
get one appeal, let them look at it again and make sure.
Right.
But so
I would hate to say that if somebody was somehow innocent, but
yes,
if you had them dead to rights, and in this case, they could say definitely, this is who attacked me.
Yeah.
This is what happened. He killed my friend. So now you have an eyewitness. You have a person who suffered by his hand, and could still say that's who did it. And then he admits it. It's like, okay.
I think you'd get a lot fewer people admitting it if they knew
exactly
that's what's going to happen.
Or maybe a lot fewer committing it. Maybe.
Hopefully.
I don't know.
But you're already taking the chance at the death penalty or spending life in prison, and that doesn't seem to deter the people that still do it.
Exactly.
But how much more would there be if there was no punishment? And then how much less would there be if there was a swift 1 year from the conviction date? You get 1 year. If something comes up and appeal it, great. But there is many cases where somebody's been in 20 years, and because of corruption and bad prosecution and hiding evidence, they've been in there and they could have been on death row.
You may fire when ready.
That's what I want to hear. I also want to call nope.
Bullshit. Bullshit.
What?
A bullshit? A bullshit? A bullshit.
That's what I'm saying.
Bullshit.
As one of my favorite little videos.
So we're gonna leave it at that, and we'll catch you guys next time. Thanks for listening.
Take care, everyone.
Yep, later. That was smooth.
Yeah.
Okay, so then this will end. We'll do it again. Whew. Yeah. I got going in the middle. I'm like, is this going to end?
A bullshit. A bullshit.
What?
A bullshit? A bullshit? A bullshit. A bullshit.